morning, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for this webinar, part of 2021's Health and Safety Month. My name is Fiona Shutt. I'm the Executive Director of Business Performance here at WorkSafe, and I'm also your host for this morning's webinar. While our program of sessions is virtual, we still have the same aims of Health and Safety Month, which is to keep you informed. And our theme this year is you learn something new every day. We've got a very interesting webinar here for you this morning with our topic focused on addressing and preventing current safety challenges in Victorian workplaces. We've structured this session with our speaker this morning, Colin Radford, Chief Executive Officer of WorkSafe Victoria, as a discussion about the challenges WorkSafe has faced, how WorkSafe is adapting, and how employers and workers can work together to prevent workplace harm. Good morning, Colin. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Fiona. Good morning to you and to all of our viewers this morning. It really is great to be with you.
Absolutely. Now, Colin, you were appointed Chief Executive Officer at WorkSafe in November 2019. So could you start by explaining to our audience could you give them a bit of an overview of WorkSafe's role and purpose?
Sure. WorkSafe is Victoria's workplace health and safety regulator. We're also the workplace injury insurer. Our purpose is to reduce workplace harm, so reduce the level or incidence of injury and illness from work, and to also improve outcomes for injured workers by helping them and supporting them to return to health and return to safe work. In prevention, our efforts are focused primarily on education and advice, on inspections, and also on enforcement. And I'll discuss each of these in more detail in a moment. But before I do, I also want to reinforce to all of our viewers that notwithstanding the challenges of the last 18 months, the challenges of the COVID pandemic, Victoria remains one of the safest places to work in the world. Having said that, there's still a lot more that we can and must do. And to really illustrate this is the very sobering fact that in the last financial year, 50 Victorians died at work. That's 50 people who should be with us today who are not, 50 families and communities who have been deeply affected. So as I said, it's incumbent on all of us to do better, to improve, and to tackle what are some pretty significant challenges in front of us.
Yeah, absolutely, Colin. And some very sobering facts there in terms of the risk of workplace harm and some of the consequences of that as well. And particularly in light of the fact that the nature of the work that we do and how we do it is changing quite a lot at the moment, particularly in light, of the last 12 to 18 months. Can you talk us through how the working environment has changed?
Yeah, well, certainly the scale of change in the last decade alone has been quite phenomenal. I think more people are working remotely, and that was the case before the pandemic came about. So there's more flexibility, more part-time and casual work. We have the gig or the on-demand economy, means more people are taking short-term contracts. We're seeing more casualisation of the workforce. And we're seeing new and emerging services that are based around platforms or technology. And in many respects, if you think about it, the level of change we've experienced in the last decade is almost equivalent to what we saw through the first industrial revolution 300 years ago. In fact, some sociologists and economists have said that the convergence of humanity and technology is so profound that they've dubbed it the fourth industrial revolution. And these changes are bringing new and emerging risks. Those who have been around for a while and have been familiar with our scheme for a while will know that it was designed in the 1980s, and it was designed primarily to prevent and compensate physical injuries. And by and large, I think the scheme has done a very good job. It served the community and those that we are here to serve very well. But the architects of our scheme did not anticipate the sorts of changes that we're experiencing today and the challenges that come with those changes.
Yeah, absolutely, Colin. And maybe just to pick up on that point in terms of the challenges and the pace at which change is occurring now, can you talk us through what some of the biggest emerging challenges are for WorkSafe?
Yeah, so I think without doubt, the biggest challenge that we face at WorkSafe, and I think as we face as a community and a society, is the significant growth in workplace mental injuries. The statistics on this front are incredibly confronting. In the last financial year, WorkSafe received more than 3,600 new claims for mental injuries. 13% of all new claims relate to a primary mental injury, and 22% of all claims that are receiving weekly income support are a mental injury claim. Now, unfortunately, this problem we expect will get bigger before it gets better, with mental injuries projected to increase to 30% by the end of this decade. So almost a third of all claims, all injured workers requiring support and treatment through WorkSafe will be mental injury claim. And these are not just statistics or numbers, these are people. These are hardworking men and women who go to work to provide for themselves and their families, and who may suffer stress, anxiety, depression as a result of an unsafe workplace or a poor workplace culture. And we simply have to do more. Mental injury and illness doesn't discriminate. We see occurrences in every industry, in every age group, in every demographic, in every sector of the economy and every part of society. So this means that improving mental health at work is perhaps our biggest challenge, certainly for the next decade.
Yeah, absolutely. And a great point too, Colin. So clearly mental health is an emerging issue in society and community, and it permeates into our workplaces, which is a big challenge for the scheme itself. So can you talk us through how, notwithstanding that seems like quite a profound challenge for the scheme, what are the others that WorkSafe are facing at the same time?
Well, I think the main one we're facing now is the one that we're all facing, which is the pandemic. And notwithstanding that, in Victoria later this evening, we reunify the state where the opens and the region and the metropolitan areas open up again, and we see some restriction on the lockdowns that we have had in place as more and more people get vaccinated. But just like the architects of our scheme didn't contemplate the growth in mental injuries, they certainly didn't contemplate that we would be in the midst of a global pandemic for certainly the best part of 2 years. The scale, the impact, the duration of the pandemic literally permeates through everything we do, and it permeates through every workplace. So I think navigating and responding to this over the past 18 months has certainly been one of the biggest and most unexpected challenges that we've faced as an organisation. And I think we could safely say that it's probably the biggest challenge that any organisation has faced, and certainly those who have joined us for this webinar this morning. I think they'd all agree that this is something that it is literally unprecedented. There was no rule book for how we respond. And as circumstances changed, as our understanding of the pandemic and transmission changed, we had to respond accordingly. And I think some of the physical and mental health impacts that we've seen throughout this time are definitely due to working remotely, that lack of connection or that sense of loss of connection, the new distancing demands, workload. No matter who you speak to, people say that workload has increased as a result, and of course exposure to the virus itself. So our focus has really been in two parts. Yes, we are the workplace health and safety regulator, but we're also a large employer. WorkSafe employs 1,500 of our own people. So our first responsibility, just as we would expect of any other employer, has been to put the health and safety and well-being of our own people first and foremost. We're also the regulator, so we've had to be engaging with other workplaces and ensuring that those workplaces understand not just their obligation, but help them with practical steps to ensure that they can operate safely and keep their workers safe from either transmission of COVID itself or some of the attendant injuries, such as anxiety, stress or depression, which some people have experienced as a result.
Now, Colin, we've talked about the changing nature of work. We've talked about the evolution in terms of the way we work, automation, gig economy and the like. Yet workers are being killed or injured in more traditional ways, despite the changing nature in work and automation and those particular elements. And can we discuss that in a little bit more detail?
Yeah, it's a great point that you make, Fiona, and it's really challenging, and frankly, it's very frustrating. We spoke earlier briefly about the Industrial Revolution 300 years ago, and frankly, the way that people are being killed at work has not really changed over that period. Falls from heights, being crushed or hit by moving objects, interactions with machinery, workplace illness and disease are still the predominant factors that are causing people to die at work. And one of the more alarming emerging trends is that many of these people are dying alone. So many people who are being killed at work, excuse me, are working alone at the time. And one of the best controls that you have to mitigate risk is the second set of eyes or the second set of ears. Someone else who's a spotter, if you like, keeping an eye out for you and any risks that you might encounter. So this is something that's proving to be a real challenge from a prevention space, because people working alone, our access to those workplaces, our ability to intervene and to change behaviours is much harder than it is in a large, well-organised workplace. So these are some of the challenges we face. Another is very concerningly the increase in occupational violence and aggression. We've seen through the pandemic the extraordinary work of our frontline and essential workers. And whether that be in our emergency services, in the health sector, whether it's our retail workers, our delivery riders bringing our Uber Eats and other and menu log food to our homes during lockdown. These people have not only kept the economy running, but they've kept us safe. And at a time when really they absolutely deserve our utmost respect and support, unfortunately, many of these workers have been subject to both not just disrespectful behaviour, but genuine violence and aggression simply for going about doing their work. This is something that's of huge concern. The rise of social media and the weaponisation of social media to attack workers and other individuals is proving very challenging. And it is something that, again, I think it's something that as a society, we really need to act upon.
Yep. Thanks, Colin. And we talked through those challenges. Clearly, there's many at the moment, specifically the more emerging ones. So as the regulator and the role that WorkSafe play in preventing those types of injuries, how are we responding to those particular issues at the moment?
Yeah, thanks, Fiona. Well, I think it's, as I mentioned, we take a three-pronged approach, if you like. There's the education and advice that we provide. There's our role as the regulator through inspections, and then there's enforcement. For those employers or duty holders, as they're often called under the legislation, who don't take the necessary steps, who don't put the safety and wellbeing of their people first, there are very strong laws. In fact, our scheme and our system operates in the criminal jurisdiction. So there are very strong sanctions in place. The most extreme of those now, the strongest of those, is our workplace manslaughter legislation. So an employer who has a willful disregard for human life faces extraordinarily strong penalties, including potentially jail time. So we use all of the tools, if you like, in our toolkit, our inspections, providing advice and guidance, to really work with workplaces to ensure that they understand the risks and they have the controls in place to minimise and reduce harm. So one of the things that we are doing is, because of these new challenges, these emerging risks, coupled with the fact that people continue to die and be seriously injured in the way that they have for so many years, is we've had to evolve our own thinking. We've got to focus our efforts and our resources where we can make the biggest difference in health, safety and wellbeing for Victorian workers. So in many respects, we're going to choose to do fewer things, but we're going to focus on doing those things exceptionally well. So we're going to take the best of our plans, our strategies, the experience and expertise that we've built up and workplaces have built up over the last 10, 20, 30 years that we've been in existence. And we're going to add new contemporary thinking and new solutions that respond to the challenges of today, but also anticipate and prepare us for the challenges of the future. So I guess in simple terms, we need to adapt to the challenges of a modern economy. And we need to be clear and deliberate in the choices that we make to focus on those things that we can control and influence. And key to this will be our use of technology, and particularly our use of data and analytics. We want to be able to better predict where harm is going to occur. Through predictive analytics, we believe that we can anticipate and we can identify the 5,000 workplaces where harm is most likely to occur. And we're going to focus on and target those workplaces to ensure that they have the support, the advice and the attention, and if necessary, the compliance and enforcement that is required so we can reduce that harm. So our interventions will be tailored to the individual needs and circumstances of each workplace. We'll be able to predict, act, and measure our impact without trying to be everywhere or do everything. There are about 250,000 workplaces across Victoria. So we can't be in every one of them at all times. We've got to make sure that we deploy our resources and our effort where we think we're going to have the most impact. And our ambition in that regard is to be the safest place to work in Australia and one of the safest in the world by 2024. We recognise that that is a bold ambition, and it is aspirational, but it is deliberately so. Because as I mentioned earlier, tragically 50 people died at work last year. The previous year, 76 people died at work. We simply have to say that as a modern society, in a modern economy, that this is not good enough. And the only acceptable number when it comes to workplace deaths and serious injuries is 0. So how are we going to do this in a practical sense? If we've got the time, there are 6 priority areas that I'd just like to quickly go through, which will hopefully give all of our viewers some more practical tips on how we're going to reduce workplace harm, both now and into the future. The first of these, as I mentioned, is using improved analytics. We'll be focusing on those 5,000 workplaces where we believe 20% of injuries are predicted to occur. Our inspectorate will be fully resourced and make proactive visits to educate and support those workplaces. But they will also hold to account any employer who risks the health and safety of their employees. Our inspectors now have the power to issue on-the-spot infringement notices for certain offences. Secondly, we'll address the most prevalent causes of fatalities and the industries where they happen: agriculture, construction, manufacturing, healthcare and transport. I'm sure this list is not a surprise to anyone on the call today. And if I can just touch on agriculture. Agriculture accounts for 14% of all workplace deaths in Victoria, yet it represents just 2% of the Victorian workforce. So it's an area that we must continue to focus on. We must change behaviours and attitudes and move away from this notion, this notion of the sunburnt country where somehow serious injuries on farms are inevitable. They're not inevitable. They're entirely preventable. So our inspectorate will again play a key role in prevention, but we've also established a specialist team to investigate workplace deaths. And with the introduction of the new manslaughter laws that I spoke about earlier, employers who cause the death of a worker can expect significant penalties. Corporate entities may be fined up to $18 million, while individuals can face jail time of up to 25 years. Our third priority is to support workplaces to be mentally healthy and to reduce workplace mental injury. We'll shortly launch a new mental health strategy, which is based on the Royal Commission into Mental Health. This will ensure that the initiatives we implement to support Victorian workplaces are driven by the latest evidence and health research. Workplace visits from our inspectors will focus on identifying and addressing systemic psychosocial hazards across all industries, including priority areas where we are seeing significant growth in mental health claims: education and training, public administration and healthcare. Guidance and practical information on issues such as workplace bullying, work-related violence, gendered violence and sexual harassment is also being regularly updated and refreshed. And we'll build on the success of our $50 million WorkWell program, in which we've partnered with well over 500 organisations to make the mental health of their people a priority. And we'll support the Victorian Government's introduction of new laws to address workplace psychological health. These laws will strengthen the OHS framework, recognising that psychological hazards are no less harmful to workers' safety than physical hazards. Fourthly, the early identification and prevention of current and emerging occupational illness and diseases. This includes asbestos-related illnesses and the lung disease silicosis, which is brought about by exposure to crystalline silica. A new licensing system for working with engineered stone will provide greater protection for workers from silicosis. And our free silicosis health screening program, which we're now running in partnership with the Alfred Hospital. These initiatives will be supported by a specialist silica field team, inspectors, investigators and occupational hygiene experts who will conduct comprehensive workplace inspections and ensure ongoing compliance. Our fifth priority is to protect the community against catastrophic events that have the potential for high consequence harm. Events such as the global pandemic and the Victorian bushfires, which had such a devastating impact on workplaces and communities, both last year, continuing into this year, and no doubt into next year. We need to ensure we're prepared and have the right resources, processes and expertise in place to support all Victorian workers. And this brings me to our sixth, but possibly most important priority, and that is to support and empower Victoria's network of health and safety representatives. HSRs are our eyes and ears on the ground in workplaces right across Victoria. We'll work with employers to raise the profile of HSRs, ensuring they're visible, respected and valued in Victorian workplaces. And we'll provide our HSRs with greater access to training, development and information. And most importantly, we'll listen to our health and safety representatives, find out how we can support them to make a profound and practical difference to their workplace. On a side note, one of the great things about my role is I get to meet with each of our new inspectors on their very first day, their first day of induction. Unfortunately, that's had to be virtually these last 18 months. I haven't had the opportunity to meet them face to face. But when I was new to the role of CEO, I did my first induction session with our new inspectors, and one of them asked a great question. They said, "What's the best bit of advice you can give us when we enter a workplace?" And I had to really think about it. And then it occurred to me, I said, the first thing you do when you enter any workplace is you seek out the health and safety representative. You make sure that the first person you speak to at that workplace is the health and safety representative. And you make sure the last person you speak to before you leave is the health and safety representative, because they're the people that know what's happening on the ground, know what's happening with their colleagues in their workplace, and are literally our eyes and ears and our arms and legs right across Victorian workplaces.
Thanks, Colin. And that's a really sort of well-articulated description of the response that WorkSafe are applying in terms of some of the challenges that we're facing at the moment. And in your answer, you talked about how WorkSafe work with employers and workers in that respective part of these 6 priorities. So can you talk us through how employers and workers play their part in keeping a work-safe place with support from WorkSafe itself?
Oh, absolutely. As I mentioned, there are 250 plus thousand workplaces across Victoria. We can't be in all of them. And the legislation is also very clear. The responsibility for maintaining a safe workplace rests primarily with the employer, and individual employees also have a responsibility to take steps to keep themselves and their colleagues safe. WorkSafe's job is to regulate compliance. The compliance actually rests with the duty holder, with the workplace itself. And as you know, so as you can imagine, we can't be everywhere. We can't be in every shearing shed, in every factory, in every office, on every building site. We do make sure that we visit as many as we can, as often as we can, but with that very deliberate, targeted focus on those areas where we believe harm is more likely to occur. So we can't achieve a reduction in workplace harm on our own. We need buy-in from every industry, every employer, and every workplace. And as Victoria begins to come out of lockdown and we slowly start reopening, it's a really good time for us all and to renew our commitment and focus from business leaders and employers and workers and health and safety representatives and those that represent them, our industry groups, our trade unions. It's a great opportunity for each of us to proactively promote health and safety in our workplaces. So to employers, I ask that you get actively involved in understanding your workplace injury profile, and more importantly, understanding the individuals that make it up. Seek out more information about where and why injuries might be occurring in your business. Think about the safety measures that you can control and influence. Get to know your health and safety representatives or your health and safety and wellbeing team. Ask them what more they need to provide a safe working environment for your people. And consult regularly with your employees. Ensure you have clear safety policies and processes that are regularly reviewed and communicated. And please, obviously, if you need any advice or support, contact us. Contact WorkSafe's advisory service. Our team is here and ready to help. To workers, I would say it's crucial that you speak up. If you feel unsafe at work in any circumstances, speak up. No job, no career, no work, no level of work is worth risking your health or your life. And to those of you who regularly work alone, please ask for support if you need it. Please ensure that others know where you are working and the work that you are doing, so that maybe they can suggest that working alone is not the best approach. I'd also encourage workers to get to know who the health and safety representatives are in their workplace, to understand the process that their employer has in place to protect them from harm, and where there might not be a health and safety representative at a workplace, I'd encourage workers to consider becoming a health and safety representative, getting the training, getting the advice and support that you need to support your colleagues and everyone's health and safety in your workplace. It's so important to be proactive and that each of us understands our rights and responsibilities. So do your research, ask questions, and notify your employer straight away if you see a potential hazard or risk. And again, the same goes for workers. If you have any question, any queries, pick up the phone and call our advisory team, or visit the WorkSafe website, where there is a large amount of information and guidance on a whole range of different risks and practical steps on how you can help to control them. So I think if I could leave our audience with one final thought, it'd be this. We will continue to have health and safety challenges at work, some we've not yet anticipated or encountered. But if we can keep the health and safety of workers at the heart of our thinking, if we can prioritise the health, safety and wellbeing of our employees above all else, if we put people before profits and lives before livelihoods, the entire Victorian community will benefit.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Colin. And we're about to call it time, but I just wanted to thank you, Colin, for your time this morning and sharing with our audience the challenges that WorkSafe is operating within at the moment in terms of its role, how it supports workers, employers and the community in that respect, and also giving us some insight in terms of the response and how WorkSafe is looking to sort of get ahead of those emerging challenges. So I wanted to thank you for that. And I want to thank our audience for joining us on this wild and woolly Victorian morning. It's a very interesting topic. It's a very important one. And there are still a couple more of our health and safety webinars across the remainder of this morning if you're interested in those as well. We hope you've found this interesting and informative. If you're looking for more helpful information, guides and tools and references, please do visit our WorkSafe Victoria website for those. And we'll also note on the screen shortly a list of all the contacts that Colin referred to as part of his discussion today that you might find helpful as well. And if you have any requests for further information, as Colin suggests, please do get in touch with us. We are always more than willing to help. And if there's something you want to discuss urgently, please call the WorkSafe advisory line and emergency line. But again, just wanted to thank you for joining us this morning. Have a great day and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.